I saw some crazy stuff during my time working at a Waffle House. I saw some brawls between drunk family members. I saw some people getting freaky in the booths like they thought no one could see them. And I saw people doing drugs right there at the counter, as if they didn't give a damn who saw or told on them. But the single worst thing I ever saw was something I walked into on a quiet Monday night shift, at a time when I never expected to see anything so haunting or horrifying. Like I said, it was just after midnight, so technically a Tuesday morning, and the only two people seated were these two dudes who looked like they were a little more than just friends. They were sitting at their booth, flirting and holding hands and stuff, then at that point, they both got up and headed for the bathroom. One of my coworkers waited until we were out of earshot to make a very crude joke about how, if they're not out in 3 minutes, I'm going in there to pry them apart. It was just a dumb joke, though. Like, I don't think anyone believed that they were about to do anything unsavory in there. Then, within a minute or two, the older of the two guys walked out of the bathroom, thanked us for his meal, and then wished us good night. As he walked out of the door and over to his car, we figured that he'd wait for his boyfriend or husband or whatever. Even as he got into the driver's seat and started the engine, my buddy and I figured any minute now, little Twinkerbell in the bathroom there is going to come running out to join his boo. But no. The older guy slams his door shut, backs up his car, and then drives out of the parking lot and off into the night. We're both like, that's weird. Where's the other guy? Then, after a minute or two of waiting around, I volunteered to head into the bathroom to see what the deal was. I honestly figured the younger guy would be in the bathroom, probably just still in a stall, crying because the older dude had just broken up with him or something like that. That, or maybe the younger dude couldn't handle his liquor, puked all over the bathroom, and then the older guy was just like, F this crap, I'm out of here. I remember pushing open the door, calling out, hello? Anyone in here? And the question immediately struck me as dumb because, unless they escaped out the air vents, there had to be someone in there. Right away I could see that there was someone sitting in the toilet in one of the stalls, but the fact they didn't respond to my question had me mildly concerned. I asked, "You okay there, buddy?" And when that question got no reply, I knew I had to check on the guy to make sure he was okay. We didn't get a lot of drug use, but it was always a possibility being a late-night spot, so it dawned on me that the guy might be overdosing or something like that, and I knew I had to act fast. I walked over to the stall, tapped on the door, but it moved, showing that it was unlocked. I then pushed it open a little more, and as it touched the guy's knees, it was just enough gentle force to push him off balance and send him falling off the toilet to his right. And the second he hit the floor, I could see something poking out of his right eye. His left was wide open and undamaged, and he seemed totally unconscious, but there was clearly something long and thin sticking out of his eye in a way that I couldn't see the exact entry wound, but I knew it must have been bad, because there was a lot of blood dripping off whatever it was that was stuck in there, on top of what was all over his clothes and on the floor, too. I immediately felt sick, but rushed to call the cops and told my coworker to lock the front doors because the restaurant was now a murder scene. And that's what it looked like to me anyway. All that blood and an unconscious person who's been stabbed right through the eye, and one who hadn't responded to anything I'd said. I was almost positive that guy was dead. So imagine my surprise when the ambulance shows up. We walked into the bathroom, and the guy that I thought was dead was just stumbling around the bathroom with a hand partially covering his wounded eye. I think the poor guy suffered some kind of horrible brain injury or something. The EMTs were telling him don't touch your eye, and not only was he acting like he couldn't understand them, but the stuff he kept responding with was like nonsense baby talk. It was really distressing to see, and I had to leave the room as the EMTs went to work on the guy and then wheeled him out to the ambulance. The cops showed up around the same time, then after locking the doors behind them, we threw up a closed sign and then got to talking to the cops and giving them descriptions of both the older guy and the car he was driving. Nothing I ever did or saw was crazier or scarier than what I saw that night, and frankly, I'm glad nothing ever topped it. But the thing that haunts me so much about the whole thing wasn't just how that poor guy got stabbed in the eye so deep it messed with his brain. It's how we never found exactly what happened or why it happened in the first place. We didn't hear any screaming or yelling, which you'd figured if there was a fight like that, someone would have made enough noise to attract our attention. But it was totally quiet in there. Those two guys looked like such a happy couple, and on the way out, the guy who had done the eye stabbing didn't seem to even have broken a sweat. He seemed relaxed, had a big smile on his face, and was perfectly charming and polite when he thanked us for everything we did that night. But all that, after he just tried to kill someone in our men's bathroom. Like I said, I saw my fair share of crazy fights and served my fair share of creepy customers, but none of those memories keeps me up at night, like remembering the way that guy smiled as he walked out. It was like taking someone's life, or at least trying to take it, was like the most normal thing in the world to him. I worked in a Waffle House for almost 2 years, mostly night shifts, and I saw some wild things in my time. I saw a lot of drama and a lot of stuff that made me laugh my butt off, but it was rare that anything actually creeped me out or scared me. But then the one thing that I actually did take home with me has stayed with me for quite some time. We had a guy pull in just after 6 a.m. on a Sunday, dressed like he was headed to church and with all the same kind of cheerfulness too. I remember his order like it was yesterday: steak and eggs, extra hash brown, with biscuits and gravy on the side. Man ate like a king that morning. Then as he sat there, over a clean plate, and as the customers were filing in here and there, I remember seeing him make a phone call. And after that, he just sort of sat there and waited. When 2 cops first walked in, people looked up, but only in the way that they would if any other kind of customer walked in. We get a lot of police officers on and off duty thanks to the 10% law enforcement discount that we offer, so it's not uncommon to see them walk through the door. But to see them walk straight up to our well-dressed churchgoer and pull the handcuffs straight out, that didn't just draw everyone's attention, it pretty much demanded it. He just stood up, turned around, let himself be handcuffed, and the cops walked him out of the building and out to the patrol car. One of the cops drove the guy off, then the other came back to recommend that we just close for the day. Forensics were about to be all over the guy's car, and it'd be one hell of a bad look to have an active crime scene in our parking lot. My supervisor touched base with management, and they agreed that having people watching all that CSI stuff over their breakfast melts was probably a major no-no. And about an hour later, we'd closed down the restaurant, and I was walking to my car just as they were pulling the first body out of that guy's trunk. I caught one glimpse, then averted my eyes because I instantly recognized that the body was small, child-sized, and I did not want to deal with the memory of seeing a dead kid like that. I texted some coworkers later on saying how I was pretty sure that they pulled a kid out of the guy's trunk, and then a few days later, the whole story broke on the news. The well-dressed, cheerful customer who ordered his steak and eggs, extra hash brown, with biscuits and gravy on the side, had killed his whole family that morning before he decided to drive them to a Waffle House. The guy must have known that, in the very best-case scenario, he was going to jail for the rest of his life. Worst case, he'd just be up for lethal injection. But before any of that, before he had to face the music, the guy wanted a few final plates from his favorite breakfast place. And I swear to God, I would never ever have guessed what a terrible thing that guy had done. The way he came up to the counter, like it was just your average Sunday morning, it was like the part of the guy's brain that accounted for emotion was just gone, or broken. I can't even imagine the kind of headspace that I'd be in if I just annihilated my own family. I lose my appetite whenever I even get remotely stressed out. So the idea that this guy bashed in his 2 kids' brains and then thought, I could go for some biscuits and gravy right now, that's just about the creepiest, most haunting thing I've ever been unfortunate enough to cross paths with. I used to work at a Waffle House, and we used to have this one family stop in whose kid was a total psycho, but also had some pretty serious learning difficulties too, so it was a difficult situation to say the least. I think he was only like 13 or 14, but we used to joke about how his parents must have been slipping supplements into his milk bottle or whatever because he was huge for his age. And that was just about the only funny thing about him though. Everything else was a total nightmare. He beat up 2 employees one day, broke one of their noses, and did thousands of dollars in damage to both company property and staffs. Televisions, windows, doors, gaming systems, windshields, glasses, phones, you name it, he broke it. His parents used to get mad at us if we called the police to help us. They didn't want him to get a bad reputation in the community, which was ironic because I'm not sure his rep could be any worse. We weren't officially forbidden from personally pressing charges, but it was not encouraged. Everyone did everything to make sure he never faced any consequences. For the 2 staff that he pulverized, he had to draw a picture to say he was sorry. He finished the picture and his parents brought him along to present it to us with an apology. And I swear to God, he looked one of my coworkers dead in the eyes and said, "I'm not sorry. I'm glad I did it. I wish I'd hurt them worse." His mom yelled at him, told him not to be so rude, and I don't think any of us were all surprised. I ended up dealing with him on a couple of other occasions, and when he wasn't in a rage, he had his moments of decency. In one of our calmer conversations, he was playing Legos, and I asked him if he'd like to talk about some ways to avoid hurting people when he gets angry. The kid looked me dead in the eyes and said, "No, I don't want to stop hurting people. I like hurting people." I asked him why, and he shrugged and told me, "I just like it. It's fun." I still think about that kid from time to time, and whenever I do, I wonder how much longer it'll be before I see him featured in some online news article about how he's killed someone or beaten them half to death, something violent in nature anyway. I hope his family have found more effective ways to deal with whatever he was suffering with, but to be brutally honest, I think the way they treated him made him worse and worse. You can't have kids like that thinking there's no consequences, even if they are a little slow. And that's how you end up with the Green River Killers or Sons of Sam. As I said, I wonder what they'll call that kid if worse comes to worse, and he ends up taking a life instead of making one for himself. Worst thing I ever saw at a Waffle House started as one of the nicest things I'd ever seen at a Waffle House. There's probably something deeply philosophical in there somewhere, but I'll be damned if it's me that's finding that. So, me and a fellow buddy stopped by a Waffle House in Gainesville a few years back, first and last time we ever stopped there. Then, as we're eating, a man comes walking through the doors and gets the reception of a minor celebrity, and we soon figured out why. The moment after the guy walked through the doors, different groups at different tables started trying to get his attention. It was just after 2 a.m, but the place was still really busy because it had all the Saturday night drinkers in there. So there was a whole bunch of people calling out, "Mr. Brewer, over here, Mr. Brewer," and stuff like that. And my buddy and I were like, "What's going on?" But like I said, we soon found out. Mr. Brewer was obviously some kind of big shot, or at least he sure played it that way, because he starts walking to each of the tables that seem to recognize him and handing out wads of cash. And he's not just giving them the money. He's sitting down with them, talking to them, asking about their families and their jobs and stuff. Real pillar of the community type things. And some folks are refusing the money and are just happy to check in with him, but others, and I mean no offense by this, look like they needed it, you know? So they seemed only too happy to take his money. Anyway, this guy carries on going from table to table, then when he seemed done with his rounds, he stood up and waved goodbye to everyone as he walked towards the doors. But then, as he's walking, some lady in the back starts calling out something like, "Why didn't you pay for our meal?" I looked over, and the lady and her old man were looking over at this Mr. Brewer guy, and they looked mad. Mr. Brewer starts telling them that he can't pay for everyone's meal. But this doesn't go down well with the lady and her man, and she starts saying how Brewer there was trying to embarrass them or something. And by this point, people are telling the lady to shut up, and this is making her man even madder, talking about, "Don't you talk to my woman that way." But Mr. Brewer is chill, tells everyone to pipe down, then basically explains that if they're going to be so rude, he's most definitely not paying for their food. People start clapping and cheering, and it's all amped up to 11 because most people are drunk out of their minds. But again, the rude couple do not take this well, and the angry man gets up, marches toward Mr. Brewer, and takes a swing at him. The guy is drunk, and Brewer seems sober as a judge, so the swing completely misses, and then people are jumping in to separate them and push the instigator out of the Waffle House. There were people keeping him outside, people making sure Mr. Brewer was okay, and people yelling at the rude lady to get outside and control her man. My buddy and I are just trapped in the middle of all that chaos, so we're both just like, let's get the hell out of here. And after taking a few final sporkfuls of food, we got up and head towards the door, right in time for the shooting to start. I didn't see where the shots came from, but I saw Mr. Brewer just buckle and hit the floor. Then the next thing, someone's getting wrestled to the ground outside, and the cops showed up just in time to put the cuffs on him while folks outside helped hold him down. And the shooter was that angry guy trying to defend his woman's honor or whatever. And he just killed a man because he wouldn't give him money to pay for his waffles. I think that was probably the worst thing I ever saw, not just in a Waffle House either, ever. And my mom loved that movie, To Kill a Mockingbird, and I once asked her why it was called something like that when there was no mockingbirds in it. And she told me it was because it was the worst kind of sin to kill a mockingbird, because all they did was sing and make folks happy. And I feel like that's what angry guy with the gun did. He killed a mockingbird. And I just pray that he realizes what he did and what a terrible, terrible sin it was. One evening, I was out in Lacey, Washington to pick up a handgun that I had recently purchased for protection. Contrary to the pickup status both online and sent to my email, the store didn't have it in stock yet and told me to come back in another week. I lived about an hour from Lacey at the time, and when I had gotten there, evening rush hour was just beginning to become unbearable. I didn't want to drive all the way back home just yet, as it would add an additional hour to my already long commute. Side note, the car that I was driving belonged to my dad, and I was borrowing it until I had enough money saved up for a new car after my beloved Honda had broken down the previous year. I killed some time bumming around the store that I had purchased my firearm from, and then decided to drive over to the nearest coffee shop. It was a newly built cabin-style cafe with a modern twist. The barista handed me my 16-ounce dirty chai, and I walked back out to my car. I then drove to a gas station around the corner, still trying to kill time until traffic thinned out. The car didn't need gas, so I pulled into a parking spot right at the corner of the four-way intersection where the gas station was located. I turned off the engine, stepped outside, and lit a cigarette, leaning against the driver's side door to avoid stinking up the interior. The weather was overcast and drizzly, but not overly cold. It was dusk, and most of the daylight had faded. The stoplights at the intersection were diffused by the late autumn mist, and I watched them flicker from green to yellow to red and black again as the traffic moved in sync with their signals. Zoned out by the lights and generally lost in thought while enjoying my coffee and smoke, I didn't notice the man walking toward me until he was already halfway across the street. He was a white guy of average height and strawberry blonde hair, perhaps in his mid-20s. He definitely hadn't changed his clothes in a while and carried a backpack that I assume held the few belongings that he had. He didn't smell, but he looked raggedy and unkempt. My immediate thought was that drugs were likely part of his lifestyle. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but I'm always cautious, having grown up in the suburbs of Seattle. The man finished crossing the street and awkwardly limped toward my car, maintaining eye contact and a strained grin. I locked my car out of caution but remained outside, smoking casually. Normally, I'm a social person, but I don't go out of my way to be unpleasant either. He approached me and stood about 10 feet away when he said hello and asked if I had a light. I hesitated, but saw no harm in fulfilling this very simple request. Taking 2 steps forward, I lit a cigarette, which he held out toward me as he approached. He attempted to make small talk, weaving in hints that he had just gotten off the bus and still needed to go another block down the road. Somewhere in his poorly crafted sob story, he stopped mid-sentence, kind of like a bad actor, and pretended to be struck by an epiphany. "Hey, would you mind just dropping me off down the road? It's not very far." I apologized and said I couldn't help because it was my dad's car, not mine, and I didn't feel comfortable driving it without his permission. A stupid but plausible excuse that I came up with on the spot. Mr. Unkempt did not like my answer, and his smile immediately turned tense and flatlined. Clearly upset, he became more insistent. "But it's just down the road," he whined. "My leg is killing me. It wouldn't even be far for you. I'll give you a cigarette." His persistence and sudden burst of hostility made my hair stand on end, and I firmly said, "No, I'm sorry. I can't help you. It's my dad's car, and he's got set rules, all right?" With 10 years of hospitality experience under my belt, I immediately offered him alternative ideas for how he could get to where he needed to be. I even suggested that maybe someone inside the gas station could help him out or call him a ride. Each word I said made him increasingly irate, and he began curling his fingers into fists, not in a threatening way, but like a toddler about to scream bloody murder for not getting their way. He seemed to pause and size me up for a very fleeting moment. I'm small and not at all intimidating physically, so I told him that I hoped he made it home safe, quickly unlocked my car, jumped in and locked myself inside. When I looked up from locking the car door, I saw him speed walking back across the street, heading in the direction that he originally come from. No limp, no awkward walk whatsoever, no distress or pain even showing slightly, just the normal speed walk of a physically well person, a very rage-filled person. I know I had dodged a bullet there, and I felt pretty dumb for hanging around the city after dark alone, and at this point I didn't care about traffic anymore, so I started the engine and hightailed it home in what ended up being an hour and 45-minute drive. But this time the traffic was 100% worth the inconvenience. And PSA, if you haven't heard it enough already, be careful who you give your attention to, especially when you're alone. Stay aware at all times and err on the side of caution, even when strangers seem harmless at first.